All righty. So, are you ready, Emily?
I am. Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jenny Hinchcliffe. I'm the Exhibitions and Events Manager here at the San Francisco Center for the Book. And I am really excited to be hosting Emily Martin of Naughty Dog Press today. So, a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. We will be taking questions at the end of this presentation. So if you could hold your questions or type them into the chat, that would be best because we'll ask all of those questions at the end. We do about 5 or 10 minutes for a Q&A. And I know that Emily has a full and exciting presentation for us, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Let's see, I'll admit this one last person. And a little bit about Emily. Let me just bring up my notes here. All right. Emily Martin is a book artist and professor at the University of Iowa Center for the Book. Her work often employs paper engineering, movable parts, occasionally puppets, and she just wrote out the entirety of Hamlet by hand on a scroll. And we're really hoping that maybe she'll talk about that project today. This is the first in our revamped series of informal studio tours and artist chats. Because Shelter in Studio has outlived its moniker, we're going to keep the concept, but change the name. So this studio visit series will now be called From the Bench. It will be a monthly presentation on the first Thursday of each month. Same time, 12:30 to 1. And so our next guest will be in August, and I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of Emily's presentation. So without any further ado, I'm going to admit these two last people, late kids. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead, I'll spotlight Emily, so you can go ahead and take it away, Emily.
Okay. Well, I want to thank the Center for the Book for San Francisco Center for the Book for inviting me. This is really fun to do, and I have great funness for the center out there. I've been there a bunch of times, and I'm seeing some familiar faces coming through in the participants. So I'm gonna go to sharing my screen, and you're gonna have to let me do that, Jenny. So that's disabled on my end.
Hang on just a sec, Emily.
Okay.
And let's see.
So what I have about 15, 16 slides. I'm just gonna sort of run you through what I've been up to for the last year or so.
All right,
Um,
go ahead and give it a try now.
yeah, I'm
Perfect.
doing that. And so should be full screen now. So I'm gonna start, this is my studio, and I am when the pandemic, this sort of starts with the timing of the pandemic. I was just finishing up a project, and then kind of went into isolation. But because my studio is at home, I actually had a fairly comfortable isolation, except for the sort of crushing anxiety that I was feeling all the time. But I was at home, I was safe, I was teaching online. And so the stairs that you can see to the left there are the stairs down from sort of my living floor to my studio floor. And so the lower level of my house, so this is the view of my studio from the stairs. So it's just one big large room. There's a Vandercook in there, some various tables, and it's sort of where everything happens. To the left, you can see a chalkboard that happens to also have a metal backing, so I can pin things up in there. So I have a Vandercook SP15 that I print on, and some type, I often print from polymer, but I do use some handset type, primarily Baskerville, which I'm very fond of, and have been using a lot for this whole series I've been doing about Shakespeare. And it's just a nice Roman face that I'm very fond of. So this is the view currently outside. It's got a few more plants in there, but it's, it's a nice, comfortable studio. In the dead of winter, it's not quite so charming, but it was not a terrible place to spend the pandemic, but aside from the fact that it was such an anxious time for all of us. And so the project I was finishing at the time is this one, which is called Oscar Wilde In Earnest and Out, and it's a set of Vauvells where the characters are mouthing the lines of the importance of being earnest, and then Oscar Wilde is on the back of each Vauvelle with sort of rebuttal or accompanying lines of his own. So I had this project that I was finishing, and then it was a very unsettled time for me, and I wasn't. I thought it wouldn't last very long, and so I had this plan that I would make a little paper puppet a day for the 2 or 3 weeks that this was going to last, which I now know is just a laughable plan. And so I ended up making 60 of them, of which you can see them all here, before I decided that maybe I would stop and just have them as my companions. But the other thing that I started doing pretty early on in the pandemic, and these are some details. So I made one a day, and they were just a daily ritual to take me into the studio, sort of something soothing to do with my hands. They sometimes had things to do with current events. They're kind of both armored and decorative, and I thought of them as dancing because I was trying to have them be sort of cheery companions. And Shauna Leno, who's a wonderful tool maker, dubbed them the Solitude Squadron. And I've thought of them that way ever since. And so I thank her for that. And then the other thing that I started doing, and the puppets were being posted on Instagram, sort of also as a daily thing. It's like, I'm here, I'm not seeing anyone, but this is what I'm doing every day. And then kind of in secret, I started copying out the scroll. And I discovered at the beginning of the pandemic that, much to my horror, I couldn't really settle enough to read, and which was really a shock to me because I'm a lifelong reader. And I had planned to start working with Hamlet, the play, Shakespeare's play, and I couldn't even settle down enough to read it. And so I started on April Fool's Day, which seemed auspicious, to copy it out in pencil onto this long scroll of paper that I'd had for years. And I didn't have much plan. I just started doing it. You can see that I sometimes had to paste paper in because I didn't quite get my spacing right. And I made up like scene markers and some architectural things. And I kind of made stamps for all of the characters. And it took me until sometime in mid-July to copy it all out. And it was just a way of almost like a daily meditation to just sit down, and the act of copying, of writing out, was very calming, and it worked to get me all the way through the play. I hadn't known that Hamlet was Shakespeare's longest play. So it ended up, the scroll itself is about 55 feet long, and I'm not quite sure what to do with it. It's my buddy, but what I discovered after working a lot on the puppets and the scroll, that they sort of started to morph and merge with each other. And so these particular puppets are the main characters from Hamlet. So there's the ghost and Ophelia and Hamlet and Gertrude, and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are kind of in the middle, and they're that one that looks a little bit like a spider of sorts, because even though they're two characters, I always kind of think of them as one. And so this is the project that I'm working on currently, and it's now that I'm vaccinated and can kind of venture out again, it kind of gives parameters. So its working title is called Madness, Reading Hamlet in the Time of COVID and Other Plagues. And so it's sort of current events, and it's still very much in progress, and there will be a text behind those figures. So it's not the scroll and it's not the Solitude Squadron, but it's definitely pulling aspects from both of them. And so this is the ghost up close, Hamlet's father. And I'm using a Chancery paper, which is made at the Center for the Book paper facility. It's a hemp and cotton paper with trace monoprints. They'll eventually be printed from polymer plates, but the paper of the costumes is handmade by Andrea Peterson. This is a paste paper on Abaca that's got a wonderful translucent quality to it. And this is Ophelia. And I kind of hadn't really thought about it, but all of them have their sort of soft underbellies exposed in various ways. And so they'll all take place. So that I decided to participate in the keepsake for the Fine Press Book Association. And this is the Gertrude character that I decided to just kind of do a little excerpt from. And I didn't have a big plan for it, but this is one of her lines from the play after Hamlet has killed Polonius. And that gave rise, I decided that maybe she had a few more things to say. So that has given rise to this project, which is kind of I'm thinking of it almost as a first pandemic project where I'm starting to kind of feel a little bit like I might be returning to the way that I usually work, because during the year of the pandemic, I was definitely just doing things, kind of anything to keep me in the studio, to keep calm, to kind of carry on and all of that. So that's what these are. And I'm gonna turn off the screen share. So we're should be back to seeing each other. And so, my normal practice is that I'm usually working on one thing at a time. And so this kind of hopping around thing is a little bit unusual for me. I often think of my new project as I'm kind of finishing, binding, or completing a previous project. So at the moment, I've got several kind of unfinished projects and this one that seemed to just go so many directions, the Madness one, that its title has always seemed really apt. So I'm kind of just hanging on to that one and following it where it goes, because it has changed so much from what I thought I would be doing with Hamlet. And it's definitely not just about Hamlet, but as I said before, all of the things that kind of went on in the last year. And so I hope to have it for Codex in the spring, next spring. So since you're all in the Bay Area, you might actually be able to come and see it there. And when I start a project, I like to keep it open enough that I'm discovering things as I work on it. And so sometimes this means that something can go really wrong. But if I plan something out completely so that I'm not learning anything when I'm making it, then I kind of don't see the point in actually doing it. I just lose interest. So it's a little bit seat of the pants. I think it's why I like trace monoprinting and a lot of other methods of sort of making it up on the press bed I use a lot of foams to print from and various things that I can sort of do on the fly, because ordering polymer plates is very useful and I use them a lot, but I don't always want to have it be that set. So that's where the foams and stick-on linoleum collagraphs and poussoir, and I like to build variables in there to kind of keep my interest up and to just find the thing as I'm working on it. So that's kind of my usual method, and I'm hoping to return to a more normal method or at least my more normal method of working. So that's my plan. So I think I've left enough time for questions.
Or you know what, do you have additional slides, Emily? Because we can run about 5 minutes over if you want, since we had a little.
Yeah, that is actually all of the slides that
Okay.
that I had, but I can go back to them if
No, it's fine. We do have a couple questions, and if people have questions right now, go ahead and type those into the chat. A couple questions that have come up. Lori Foster was interested in knowing the size of the puppets.
Oh, I always like to do it this way. This is the size of the puppet. They're sort of size of my head, which was not my measure, but so they're about 10 inches tall, and they, they're collaged with various Japanese papers and things, and these are two of them that that I've kind of pulled out from the box. And as I say, there's 60 of them, and I had a really lovely time kind of going through all my paper drawers and pulling out all my decorative papers, and I have a box of washi tape that so I kind of with my editions, they always tend to be a little bit darker. I like to use a lot of humor, but the one of the things that I really enjoyed with the puppets was that each one was essentially a one-off. So it's like, what am I thinking today? And there's a whole siege where a bunch of them are giving the finger because I was so annoyed with the governor, my governor. I don't feel like she's my governor, but of the state in which I live. So she was getting a lot of that from me, not that she would know. And so it was a lot of that kind of thing. There's, it was a colleague of mine, Sarah Sauer's birthday. So the character has a birthday cake in her pocket. And they were really just like, what's today? And it's a very freeing thing. They're a one-off, each one. They relate to each other because they're kind of all made in a similar fashion, but I didn't plan them. I would just go in and do one, and I did do one every day for 60 days, and then I stopped, and then about 4 days later I did two more. It was kind of like it was too abrupt to stop, so I had to ease out of it, and I did a couple more shortly after George Floyd was killed that were related to that. So they were their own thing, and that was the final one of that. I haven't made any of them since then, but I did make the set of Hamlet ones, and those will be additions as a part of the book. This is maybe the book. This is the mock-up of it. So the characters will be held in and sort of able to move on the page. They have a kind of a attachment, but it's going to be very densely printed, I think. I don't know if it'll be my handwriting. So as I say, aspects of the Hamlet scroll and aspects of the puppet are kind of, I don't know, some sort of death match with each other for this book. So we'll see how that ends up. And I have just pages and pages of writing, and I keep a notebook, which I'm using to prop up my computer. So I keep a daily, not daily, but I keep a constant studio journal that's usually I teach bookbinding 1, so I always have plenty of blank books. And so I have all kinds of notes and observations in that are going to end up in the text in some manner. But that part is very much unknown. So that's kind of my project, my upcoming project.
Jessica is interested in knowing what led to your interest in Shakespeare.
This was, I think it was in 2012. I was at Codex, and the head of the Bodleian was one of the speakers, and he was talking about this fine press or designer binding competition they were doing, and they were surprised that a previous one that there weren't any artist books, and so they weren't going to have a set text, so it was just going to be anything to do with Shakespeare. and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then at the Guild, the Guild of Bookworkers, the following fall, I saw a prospectus for this show, and it had a pop-up in it. And somehow or another, that seemed like maybe it was talking to me. And I was feeling a little bit stuck in my own work, and I thought, well, what the heck? Let's just try making a designer binding. And I wasn't content to just do that, so I actually made a carousel book about Hamlet, or sorry, about Romeo and Juliet. So it's the theater in the round, and what I discovered that time was that reading Hamlet, I don't know, fixated on Hamlet, reading Shakespeare, when most of my really major reading of a lot of the plays was when I was in school, so a really long time ago, they just strike me completely differently than they did when I was young. And because they're plays, they're meant to be, they're performative, so you can interpret them lots of different ways. So I did the Romeo and Juliet for the competition, and I got in and I won a medal, and I was like, oh, maybe I'm onto something with this. And so I decided to try it again where I didn't have all the rules of the competition, because the first model I made, I discovered, was actually too large for what they were accepting. So then I did Desdemona, where it was the play Othello, but I decided that the annoyingly passive character of Desdemona could maybe stand up for herself a little bit. And so in a form of kind of erasure poetry, I took all of her words in the play as the words that I could use, and I rewrote what she could say. And so that I was able to, and I'm gonna go back to the screen share because I think I can show you this. So I did these, oops, is it gone?
No, we see it.
Okay. So I gave her new lines, and I did 7 of them, and did them as a suite of prints. And then I ended up making magnets of the all the words and putting them in this box. It turned into this incredibly elaborate project, but it kind of opened up this whole thing of really playing around with this, and I kind of make jokes about it, but because Shakespeare is long dead and in the public domain and all of that, it's an odd collaboration of sorts, because I don't have to receive any input from my author. I'm just allowed to kind of do what I want, and it's very freeing, and as I said before, the performative aspect is very appealing to me, and I think that's how, somehow how I've trended more towards puppets, and I did a thing on I was starting to work on King Lear, excuse me, on King Lear, the play, and then of course with our previous president, there were some parallels and some not, and that, so I ended up doing 2 books. There's King Lear, spelled Lear, like the play, and that was about the play, and then there was King Lear with 2 E's that was about the former president, and you can see a video of that. There's a link through my website if you want to see it. It's on YouTube, and it's a set of 5 puppets, and they have lines of things that he said. And the puppets all have orange in some manner. One of them's wearing black and white stripes, because I still hope they'll go to prison. But so, and then I was gonna go move on to Hamlet, and I did a kind of a composite of all of the comedies of Shakespeare, because they seem quite similar to me. So I had trouble keeping them apart. So I decided to make them all one. And then that kind of leaves me with Macbeth, but we'll see. I may just stop. And I segued over to Oscar Wilde for a while, just because it was like, I can do something else. And I've always, Oscar Wilde is, he's sort of wondrously funny while also being extremely pointed about his observations about society. So he seemed appropriate.
Well, well, the comments, I'm sure you've been sort of perusing the chat, but everyone is thrilled to see your current work and hear about what you've been up to and working on. And the Hamlet and the puppets are big favorites. So thank you for sharing those with us.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah. All right. If there are no other questions, and it looks like there are not, we'll go ahead, and I would like to thank Emily for being part of our From the Bench studio series. Yay. People are clapping. Let's clap for Emily, everybody. Yay.
Oh, thank you all for coming. It's been a pleasure. And I've
Yeah.
enjoyed looking at all the archived videos. It's really great to see everybody.
Yeah, it's good fun. And on that note, what I will say is that in August, on I believe August 5th, we will be hosting Dawn Rash in our second From the Bench presentation. So we'll have details and a registration link up about that in the very near future. I would encourage everyone to stop by our website because we've posted our open hours at the Center for the Book. They have changed, so you should take a look at that. We have a new exhibition up in our gallery space, and we're inviting people to come see that as well. So we hope you can stop by. Be sure and look at our hours, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday only right now. And we hope to see you on site soon. So thank you, Emily. Thanks again. And thanks everyone for joining us today.
Yes.
We'll say bye for now. Thank you.